Hey, welcome everybody. This is John Wilhoit with the YOLODoor.com, and we're embarking on another interview in our series of certain jobs out there that you may have considered or may not have considered, but it's a big world, and a lot of times, it pays to do some homework. And this interview session is one of those pieces. And with me today is Daniel Hicks. Daniel is one of the campus pastors at North Metro Church in Atlanta, Georgia. And Daniel, thank you so much for jumping on board.
Hey, my pleasure, man. Anything for you, John. You're a good friend, and I appreciate what you do for our church. And just pleasure to hang out with you, chat a little bit.
Cool, absolutely. Well, you've had a background with several different roles as a pastor, but for people that may feel, a calling from God or an idea that, hey, that's something that I really want to look into, a lot of times they don't really know what goes on. So maybe paint that kind of broad picture for us of, what does it mean to be a pastor?
Yeah, I had several different roles. Started out in student ministry, several student ministry jobs on the way, and then I was the Lord blessed my family and I to the point where we were able to plant a church in Chattanooga and lead that for almost 6 years. And now I'm a campus pastor at North Metro. But I started out as on the groups team, doing some various other things. But along the way, the common denominator between all of that, at the end of the day, I believe a pastor's job is to, and this is kind of broad, but man, love Jesus and love people. It's all about people. The pastoral team at North Metro actually gets together, and we've been reading a book for the past several months together. And just yesterday's chapter was this old wise sage who's been pastoring for, I don't know, 1,000 years or so. And he was just reminding us it's all about people. We love Jesus and we care deeply about people. So if you were to just bottom line what a job description for a pastor looks like, doesn't matter if it's student ministry, groups, lead pastor, hey, you got to love people and try to lead and shepherd people.
Yeah. Outside of that, not outside, I guess, but part of that is, again, I think what people don't see. What people see is the person that's up there, at the lectern or at the altar, whatever, who's leading worship. But they don't get a sense for what goes on necessarily behind the scenes, that there is, a management component, a creative component, a recruiting component. I mean, there's all kinds of things that are going on. How does that look, from what you've seen? Because you've been at a small church, a plant, and now at a big church with a big staff.
Yeah, we wear a lot of hats. The joke I always make is people are like, hey, you want to go to lunch? And I was like, yeah, I only work one day a week. So why not? My schedule's full. It's wide open. We can have lunch. But yeah, there's especially, well, I guess in every church, especially in a church plant, but even at North Metro, a church that's kind of blowing and going, there's a business side of things. And thankfully, I don't have to wear a lot of those hats because I'm not necessarily business minded, but hey, we run an organization. So we got to take care of some business things, got to pay some bills, make sure X, Y, and Z is taken care of. But some of my main rocks that I think goes on behind the scenes is, yes, I'm always creating content for teaching on Sundays, a lot of study preparation. You talk about creativity. I want to bring the best. And so I don't want to be up there as dry. And so I'm always thinking of creative ways to teach God's word. But realistically, that's a small portion of my time. I think a lot of my time is recruiting and training, equipping leaders to do the work of the ministry. It's not a one-man rodeo. Jesus gathered 12 guys. More than that, but he had 12 like his people, and he invested in them and gave them the reins to his kingdom, and they changed the world. And so in some regards, we're trying to do the same thing. We're trying to invest in people, lead people, pour into them, raise them up while we're being raised up at the same time. And that's where a lot of my time is spent. And then I think another big rock would be pastoral care. There's always needs out there. Our phones are always blowing up. Someone's in a hospital. Someone's going through a crisis. Someone has passed away. And we're trying to just minister to those needs. And so as I look at my life, those are kind of the big rocks. There's also the teaching of God's word. There's the creative side of things. There is the training and equipping leaders to do the work of ministry. And then there's the pastoral care side of things. So those are kind of the big rocks for me.
Okay. So when you first, got into that that world, what skills did you bring to the table that were kind of a natural fit?
I don't know if I had any skills, John. Maybe some naivety. I was just green. Honestly, I think my skills that I think I still have, hopefully, is like an excitement about the Lord, excitement about trying to help people. Personally, this is a skill set that my family infused in me early on. Like I hope people around me say I'm a hard worker. I was always raised, hey man, go to work, like, do your job, get it done, work hard. It's unto the Lord, but just work hard. And I think that was a skill set that, hey, I don't mind hard work. But also maybe this is more of a posture than a skill set, is like, nothing's beneath me. Like I'm not too good to
Yeah.
do it. Hey, I mean, I was a church planner. Like, hey, somebody needs to scrub the toilets. I'm like, hey, I'll do it. I mean, one, because I want to model servant leadership, but two is because, hey, I'll do it. So I think with some of that, just like this care and love for people and Jesus, and then a willing and attitude to do anything and just work hard.
Yeah. Yeah. Now, what skills have you developed? Because obviously more and more responsibility has been, dropped on your plate.
Yeah,
Where have you had to kind of learn new skills and had those emerge from the work that you're doing?
I think some of the skills I've learned and am still learning kind of goes back to like investing in leaders and building up other people and developing people so they can reach their full potential. Is, I have this tendency, again, because I was always raised, hey, work hard, do your job. That I was like, hey, I'll just do it. I'll do everything. And I'm like, hey, you can't always do everything. You don't have an infinite amount of time, especially now with a growing family. I can't be everywhere all times. And so you've got to really pour your life into raising up other people and raising up leaders and giving away ministry, giving away work, which is good for me. But it's also good for them, because I don't want to rob anybody of an opportunity that they could be used by the Lord to do certain things. And so I think that's been a big deal, is especially coming from a smaller church to a bigger church. It's like, hey, to get stuff done, you've got to give things away and develop people so they can really be effective at what you've asked them to do and what they've been called to do. I would hope that the people around me would say, over my years of ministry, I've been in ministry for almost 22 years, that I've developed a habit of becoming a better listener. I mean, when I started, I was just a young punk dude who was like, I cared for people, but I didn't necessarily really listen well to see kind of what was going on. Guys with a tendency of just hearing something and your mind runs 500 steps ahead, and you're like, oh, I know what the solution is going to be. I can't wait for them to stop talking, because I'm going to be like, bam, 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 bam. Here you go. Just do that and you'll be fine. And I mean, that's still part of like some of the things that, happen in my world. And I have the tendency to shake that off, or to do that. But I'm trying to fight off more of, hey, just listen, empathize, just care deeply about this person by giving them your presence in the moment, and not just trying to run ahead and fix. And so some things that I'd say, hopefully the people around me would say I'm getting better at and have gotten better at over the years.
Yeah. That's cool, man. That's such a skill needed in so many different places. Besides just the church, that ability to listen and really hear people. Did you have any preconceptions? When you got called to go into the ministry, did you have any ideas like, well, it's going to be like this? And then when you actually got in there, you found out that, dang, man, I was wrong on this.
Yeah, I mean, I think my preconceptions would be that helping people, one, they would be more like, man, thank you so much. You're amazing. Again, you don't get into it for the accolades or the, hey, you're amazing, but you're trying to lay out your life and trying to invest in people, and sometimes bend over backwards to help them. And sometimes instead of like getting that, dude, thank you so much, it's almost like, I don't know, it's like they could care less or so, which, and again, that's not why you do it. But you thought, man, I just gave up time with my family, And there's been times where I've had to miss a day or two of like a vacation because I'm having to come back to minister to somebody, and people are just like, almost like, yeah, well, that's what you should have done. So whatever. So I think I had a preconceived idea that maybe there'd be a little more praise involved with it. But again, that's not what we're into it.
Right.
I also think this is where man, it breaks my heart now. Is like, I look at my own life too. So I put myself in this camp. Is I just thought things would be different as far as like, I thought I'd be over certain things now. Like, I thought I'd be better at certain things. Like, growth is hard. Spiritual growth is hard. There's all this war going on. I mean, John, I know you've been investing in guys for a long time, and you've probably had the same dude talk about the same thing for like 3 years or 4 years. Like, bro, come on. Like, I thought it'd be different. I thought you'd be way past all that now. And so you're like, man, what is wrong with that? But then the Lord's always like, hey, Daniel, but you and I have been working on the same thing for 44 years.
Yeah.
So what's wrong with you, Daniel? So I just thought that'd be
Let me give
different.
you funny. When I was graduating from college, I'm standing in line at the bookstore selling back my final set of books. And there's an end cap of books on overcoming procrastination. So I bought one. And man, that thing sat in my bedroom for like 17 years, never getting, I think I read like 20 pages of it and never finished the thing.
Oh, yeah.
But yeah, let me ask you this. As we're talking, it brings something to mind that I suspect is out there, because I've experienced it as I have, been plugged in to the church, is that people forget that pastors are people. They almost think that they're like these bulletproof, robots that operate in this certain way, and that they forget they've got feelings, families, obligations, challenges. They don't want to know that all that stuff is going on with the pastor, and so they ignore it. And I've got to believe that comes back and affects you in some ways.
Yeah. It does. I mean, I will say that I've tried to be, maybe because I'm wired a certain way, that, and maybe you've even seen some of this, hopefully you observed this a little bit in me, is I try to be, at least even in my teaching and in my personal conversations, just try to be real. And I do that because I think it's beneficial for my own soul, just to say those things out loud, that, hey, I'm not okay. I mean, recently I taught on grief and talked about the closest thing I ever had to a brother taking his own life, and I was not okay. I really was not okay for months. And I do that because I think it's therapeutic for me to process and to get it out there, but also to show the people, hey, listen, we're not bulletproof, and the enemy hates me. He hates you. And so we're in this together. And so it's just a kind of a cry for us as men too, to check on each other. And so everything that I would hope for a man in our church, I want to live that out. Like, we tell guys, hey, don't do life alone. Get in a circle, have some dudes you can tell things to. And we shy away from like being vulnerable or transparent. And I understand that. But on some level, I need some dudes I can say that to and have that conversation with, because, man, I am not bulletproof. I am not that good. I'm baffled and amazed at how messed up I still seem to be after, walking with the Lord for so long. And I need help as much as anybody else. I mean, we're in this together. I mean, we're all in the same boats. I still have some of the same temptations and struggles. The Lord is kind to help me put some things in play that we always talk about to kind of get better. But yeah, I mean, we are not bulletproof. And the guy that thinks he is bulletproof, that's the guy that I'm like, man, watch out, bro. Watch out, man. That's how the enemy wants you to think, is you are bulletproof, because he's going to get you.
Right.
Yeah.
So how does a pastor know when they're doing a good job? I see, and it's kind of funny. As a sales guy, you always know. I mean, you can be doing what you think are the right things, but if your pipeline isn't growing, and if you're not closing business, and that happens consistently over time, you're not getting it done.
Yeah.
But for a pastor, you can't necessarily measure things on church membership. You can't, I'm sure some pastors do look at that. Is my church growing? But I mean, that has just as much to do with the demographics of the area they're in as anything else. So how does a pastor know? Am I doing a good job?
Well, I was waiting on you to tell me if I was doing a good job, John, because I that's a great question, and I have joked before that, man, I wish I just had a job where, like, I don't know, I went and drove a trash truck, or I was a builder, because at the end of the day, I can look back and be like, hey, I did something. All of that trash got picked up, or that house got built, or, I was a lawn care guy. So, hey, I cut that grass. It had something tangible to point to.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's somewhere the struggle is sometimes you don't know, or you think you are doing really well because you look at the wrong metrics. Like you talked about, sometimes you're like, man, we must be crushing it because the church is growing, financially and people and stuff. And like you just said, you hit the nail on the head. Or you just might be in the right neighborhood. And people are coming. And so I don't have a lot to point to. I will say kind of my bedrock is, if I feel like I am being faithful and I'm giving my all to what God's called me to, and I've poured it all out there, regardless of what I think the results should be, I'll lay my head on the pillow and I'll sleep good at night, knowing, hey, I've done what He's asked me to do. Results may be all over the place, but I'm going to feel good. I will say, for me personally, because I'm on the middle of the ladder of like our organization, I have a boss I report to, and we meet several times a month to just discuss things. Just met with our senior leader yesterday, and it is nice to hear people above you looking in at your life and seeing your work and observing it and saying, hey, listen, you are doing a good job. Like, that's always nice to have.
Right.
But even if I didn't have that, internally, I go back to, I'm doing what as best I can. I'm trying to be as faithful I can to do what God's asked me to do, and I can live with that. I don't see any gaping holes into, like, man, I thought I was supposed to do this and I've just blown it because I'm not. So I'm just trying to be as faithful as I can to what I know to do. And I will say, for me personally, and I'm wired relationally, and just care about seeing people get connected. This is something I feel like in my current role as the campus pastor of our church, I feel like there's some success in what we're doing, not necessarily what I'm doing, but just in what we're doing. When I see other people connecting, when I see like the people I'm leading and trying to invest my life into, these leaders I'm trying to raise up, when I see them out there doing it, and I see them out there like leading other people, and they're trying to replicate their life and make disciples that make disciples. And, we just had an event at our church, two back-to-back events, man church, women's gathering. We had several hundred people there each night. And the numbers were awesome. I mean, because they were record numbers for us as far as these gatherings. But underneath it, to me, the gold was seeing these leaders that we shoulder tapped to help with the event, to make sure that we built this relational environment and people felt connected and felt like a part of it. Watching that night, all those leaders care for the people that came in the doors. Between both nights, we had about 90 leaders that we had shoulder tapped to say, can you help us make sure that no one walks alone, that everyone walks in and feels like they're a part of things? And for me, because again, how I'm kind of relationally bent, I look at that and I see, I mean, John, you're one of them. Like, these people out there caring for people and inviting them in and saying, hey, I got a group you can come into. We'd love to circle up with you. You can be part of the crew. I look at that, and bro, I'm like, man, to God be the glory, because that's awesome. That's a win for me. And I see that happening. And I'm like, I don't need somebody to tell me that I'm doing a good job. I feel like, hey, we're winning here. We, not necessarily just me, but we are winning, because I'm seeing kind of the mission being played out, fulfilled, people feeling cared for it. I'm like, hey, that's what my heart is going at.
People are growing and connecting.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So I see that, point to, hey, that's the win.
Yeah. Yeah. Now, the flip side of that coin is, not every pastor is successful. And, we can look at, people who, like, the easy example is Jim Baker and the moral failure that happened there. But that was a huge church where he became isolated in the midst of things, and temptation went crazy. But in every church, I think you see pastors that, either they simply can't create a healthy church environment, or they have some other struggle where they may even leave, their the servant world and move back into like, secular business or something. So from what you've seen and people you've talked to and peers that are, are in the clergy, what makes a pastor fail?
Yeah, I mean, the easy just kind of words that come to my mind are, and we can kind of go through them. I would say pride. I mean, pride gets all of us.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe even control. Maybe unwilling to give things away, and because of whatever, maybe pride, or I can do it better, or I don't know how to raise up leaders. They just have control, which kind of think puts a lid to how much things can grow, because you can only do so much. Also think you hit on it, isolation, because there's this kind of facade that maybe pastors think they have to wear. I mean, I grew up in a traditional fundamental church, and as a kid, no one told me this, but my perception just by observation was the pastor was like the Wizard of Oz. He's behind the curtain, and you don't approach behind the curtain. And it's like I kind of put the pastor on this pedestal. And again, I developed that thought because of observation. And I think maybe the pastor in those times, maybe there's still some today, kind of like it that way. Like, hey, everybody needs to look at me like I'm the expert, blah, blah, blah. And so I think that's lonely.
Yeah.
And if you're trying to keep that facade up, you've got to kind of remain isolated. And I'm telling you, bad stuff happens in the dark. They say negatives, this is old school reference, negatives develop in the dark room. And I think a lot of guys, because they're trying to put on this facade, they got to play that game. And it is a game that I think a lot of people lose, and we've seen it. And so I think that could be the downfall of anybody, not just pastors, but I think it does really affect pastors a whole lot.
And I think in some churches, you've got pastors that they are the final authority. And whereas like at North Metro, I know there's, a board and a board of elders that the senior pastor reports to. So he's got an accountability structure around him to not only ensure that he's doing the right things, but to provide support, as well. And I think if you get into a place where you don't have those people that, provide a framework of accountability and support, then that isolation is even worse, because then the pride can run rampant.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And kind of a tangent off that, but this is it's something that happened to me recently that I'm like, hey, I need to check myself. I think the line is check yourself or you wreck yourself. And so I was sitting down with a guy, kind of like this, had a podcast interview, and I try to take care of our guests when they come in to our house, and had some water out for this guy. And we sit down, and I was like, hey, you need anything? And I mean, give me grace here. But he had a couple of bottled waters in front of him. He goes, hey, do you have Fiji water? I was like, I brought you some Deer Park water. And again, I don't know all the backstory, so I'm going to give the guy some grace. But he literally, it's like, well, I called and I'd asked y'all to give me some Fiji water and stuff. And again, there's probably a whole story, maybe some health reasons why. But part of my sinful heart and my flesh is like, bro, like, dude, just drink the water, man. Like, don't be that guy. Don't be like entitled and stuff. And so I've told guys around me, we've kind of used this as a teaching illustration. I'm like, hey, the moment I start walking in a little bit of entitlement, and you see something in me like that, punch me in the neck, bro. Punch me in the neck. Like, don't ever let me be that guy, because that's a slippery slope. And again, I want to give this guy grace in this situation, grace, because there's probably a lot of factors behind it. But I'm like, I just want to surround myself with guys who can see into my life and to be like, hey, Daniel, you told me to punch you in the neck.
So you demand only green M&Ms before it's your day to preach?
Bro, heck no, man. Heck no. I grew up a poor kid. I'll take anything, man. I'll take anything.
Yeah. All right. So I want to get to another coin in the mix, a front side and a back side. What are the things in your job that caused you the most stress? And what are the things that are the most fun?
Oh, man. Stress. So, John, little backstory. So I got interviewed and really hired on at North Metro to be in their groups department. And you and we've played ball since I've been there because I've worked on the men's side of things as well. Like, so truth be told, day one, I come into North Metro as part of their groups team. And my boss sits me down and was like, hey, oh, by the way, this true story. Oh, by the way, you also oversee our men's ministry, all the stuff we do there, man church stuff. And I was like, oh, by the way, I'm like, hey, here's this contract, like slide another zero on that or something. I was like, that's a big deal. But I will say I love it because, and I think that was birthed out of in sitting with the elders and them asking me, they asked almost the same question you just asked. And it's still true in my heart today. And this is why I think they said, oh, by the way, we want you to help out with this. Is because the thing that causes me the most stress in my life, thing that breaks my heart the most, is I would say men not being the men that God's called them to be, abdicating their roles as husbands and fathers, and just being busy at work and their house is burning to the ground emotionally and relationally, like not leading their families like that. To me, I feel like God has placed a level of leadership on the men to lead. I mean, we talk about it every time we gather at our event called Man Church, where I talk about Adam in the garden. You know, God placed Adam there, gave him a shovel and said, hey, Adam, the rest of the world should look like this garden. Get to work, use your life, lay it down, be a sacrificial servant leader, and help the rest of the world be cultivated and to flourish. And I feel like that's still a call on men. And I honestly feel like a lot of men abdicate that, or they're busy cultivating like the business field and their house is falling apart. Relationally, they don't know what's going on with their wife. They don't know what's going on with their kids. They're depending on the wife or the church to raise their kids and disciple their kids. And it infuriates me to the point, in that interview with the elders, I won't say it here, first time ever, John, I wouldn't suggest this to anybody. I might have actually cussed in the interview. Like I'm sitting before these elders and I'm like getting in my feels and my heart rate's pumping. I'm like, I just want to tell guys, get their together and get to work, you know?
Right.
Because that's how I feel. Like I just want men to be the men that God's called them to be. And I want to give my life to help out, be a solution to that problem. But when I see it falling apart, it infuriates me. I mean, truth be told, one of my heroes in the faith, the guy that officiated my wedding, he's a pastor, discipled me. He's been in ministry for, I don't know, 30 years. He left his wife and kids like 2 years ago. And he lives in another state. I want to drive and find him and wrestle him to the ground and punch him in his throat and his face over and over again in the name of Jesus with love, because it ticks me off, man. It really ticks me off.
Yeah.
And I want to grace guys, because I know the journey's hard, but I want to be like, hey man, get your crap together, get to work. We're here to help. Let's go. Let's get after it, because it makes a difference.
Right.
So that's what infuriates me or causes me stress, is when I see the wheels falling off in the life of men. What excites me would be some of when I see guys doing it, you know, and then in addition to that, kind of go back to what I just said about those events and seeing those 90 leaders caring for people, inviting people in, say, hey, we're on this journey together. I'm going to go with you. Like, it's just when you see people get it, you're like, man, that's awesome. That's awesome. I want to give my life to this right here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So in fact, let's cover one more thing before I go there. And that's, at the end of the day, this is a job for you. While it's a calling from God, you do have a family in that beautiful picture behind you that you are responsible for. Somebody coming into ministry, what should be their expectation about income? And I know it changes over time as you grow in your job, but just somebody that, comes in as an entry level, let's say, a youth pastor or whatever, which seems to be where a lot of people start.
Yeah.
What should they expect?
Yeah. Well, I hope that you're not in it for the money, because
certainly,
yeah, it's not about the money. I will say different stops on the way have paid differently. Different places in town you go to pay differently. North Metro is extremely generous, but I mean, I've had conversations when I get kind of in the flesh and you start to see things like inflation. You're like, God, I literally could make a ton more money doing anything other than this right here. And I mean, be honest with you, I've had that conversation in my head, and the way I kind of get out of that line of thinking is, it's not about the money, and this is a calling. Because the reality is, I know me personally, and if somebody's feeling called to ministry, I'm sure this would be the same for you. And I'd say people in the ministry, most people in the ministry feel the same way. You could probably go make a ton more money doing anything else, but you're not going to be that fulfilled, because if it's a calling, this is what you were called to do. And it's not about the money. And I will say the cool thing, God is always taking care of us. We've trusted him. It's never been about the money to me. Truth be told, this is probably maybe terrible business practice, but all my stops on the way, I never once negotiated a contract, never once even asked, hey, what are you going to pay me? I just was like, hey, God will take care of me. I trust the people I'm going to be employed by. And whenever they slide a contract over me, to me, I'm like, hey, that's awesome. Because to me, I've always just trusted God. So some people might say, well, do you know you can negotiate that? I'm like, yeah, I get it. I get it. But that's just my personal take. But the cool thing is I just try to live open-handedly and trust God. And the cool thing is, talking about the picture behind me with all my kids, all of us, including me and those kids, we try to live by faith and trust God. And we have all seen miracle after miracle, like God just do just really cool stuff. I mean, truth be told, my kids who are driving, people have given them cars. We've been able to give away cars. People have been able to bless us. I mean, just I could go story for story of God's faithfulness, provision. So I would just say, hey, don't make it about the money. It's about a calling. And yeah, sometimes the money is, but hey, trust God in everything. Trust God in everything, and he can provide and will provide. And so that's been my story. And my kids have had a front row seat to all that. And I hope they grow up just with this ferocious faith that, hey, listen, God will take care of us. Like, I mean, I do hope they all grow up and become super rich and they take care of me. But if not, like, it's okay. God, he always provides in some way, shape, form, or fashion.
Yeah. So last question. If somebody watching this felt God calling them into the ministry, how do they do that? I mean, obviously there's always the go talk to your current pastor, but they only have visibility into their own church to some degree. But if somebody really felt God calling them into the ministry, what would you recommend they do to start making that happen?
Yeah, you're right about going to talk to their pastor or somewhere, like just get involved. I mean, get plugged in, get some reps underneath your belt to see if it's really a calling, see if you really want to do this, or if you're like, hey, that was just like the food from last night talking. I got in and God has confirmed this is not for me. But I would just say, find a place to plug in, start serving, because at the end of the day, that's what you're going to give your life to. If it's a calling to do ministry full time, it's a life of serving and caring for people. So go start doing that now, whether you get a paycheck or not. I know for our church, we have a lot of opportunities to serve. We also even have an intern program. So you can get on the intern and kind of make pennies on a dollar and figure out, hey, is this something I want to invest in? And then there's a lot of places I know for our church. Our lead pastor is connected with tons of other pastors in the area. And so we started this thing called Engaged Churches. And so once a month we meet together, and we just actually started breaking out by regions because there's so many guys involved. But we broke out with the kind of the Marietta region just 2 weeks ago, and there was about 20 guys in the room. And in the network, let's say there's 100 guys, 100 churches. And I say all that to say, if somebody came to us right now and was like, hey, I want to be in ministry, I want to, and kind of figure things out. If there's not a spot for them at our church to serve or to intern at, we call the Engaged Churches. Hey, we got somebody who I think you need to connect with. Put them in. Where can you put them in? So there's ways out there. Just I would connect with people, make conversations. Okay. But at the end of the day, get in the game. Try it out. Again, you need
Yeah.
to get some reps. And when you get some more reps, you'll figure out, man, is this really what I want to do? Or this is not what I want to do at all?
Right. Right. Cool. Well, Daniel, man, I really appreciate you plugging in this morning and doing this. Cause like I said, what we're trying to do is make sure that as people are trying to explore different careers, I know that a lot of thoughts, a lot of pulls, a lot of interests come to the surface, but there only seems to be little snippet videos out there. The 2-minute video that says, "Hey, what's it like to be in sales?" which is, kind of a joke that doesn't even scratch the surface. So, I really do appreciate your plugging in and helping out with this.
Yeah. Well, my pleasure, man. Thank you for being who you are, man. You're encouragement to me. I look at your life and, man, you've been faithful, faithful, faithful. You are not one of those guys that causes me stress in my life. They're like, man, I just wish this dude would get his crap together and get to work. Like, you've always been in the trenches and faithful, 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 man. And you're making me and a bunch of dudes around you better. And I thank you. Their wives thank you. Their kids thank you. So, man, John, I appreciate you, man. Just been,
I appreciate you
been
too.
steady, 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 man. So thank you.
All right, man. Good deal.